Hey, folks, and welcome back to the D-Read podcast. My name is Brendan. I'm here with Isaiah and Christian Reza. Christian, you want to dive into your background a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Dude, but just off the cuff too, like I'm really stoked to be with you guys. I'm a
We're
fan.
stoked to have you.
I'm a fan of what you're doing. I think it's really cool, unique. There's not a lot of projects out there that are diving into the real estate space anyway. Like there's only really a handful, but I think the way that you're doing is just awesome. So, but yeah, a little bit about me. I've been in marketing for 8 years. Just that's what I do. I currently am working for, actually, this is just starting up, but I'm going to be working for Novez, which is a blockchain data company, very similar to like Flipside Crypto and others. And I've been in Web3 since 2020, really got heavily involved into like NFTs and DAOs in 2021 and collecting bounties and just really working in that space in the last couple of years. And, I'm really excited to see what happens moving forward. But glad to have found my place and not going anywhere. So Web3 for the win.
Heck yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been following you on LinkedIn, and your post got a ton of engagement, and you have a ton of good advice over there.
appreciate
Um,
that.
let's dive into some of it. You lay out a bunch of marketing frameworks, um, issues, common mistakes, best practices. What are your top three best practices for Web3 projects when they're building a community and marketing?
It really comes down to, well, it depends on also the business and what your business model is. Like, when you're looking at like NFT projects, it's going to be very different than, let's say, what we're doing now with Novez's blockchain data. Our audience is very different. Our audience is much more maybe technically literate versus like if you look at Cool Cats and now they're trying to move sort of mainstream to 2.5, right? Web 2, 2.5. So your messaging is going to be different, but just like any other business, you really have to go from a marketing lens and say, okay, who is our target audience? How do we want to appeal to them? What is our brand going to represent? How would we convey our brand's personality? If our brand was a person, what would their personality be like? What should our content be in what type of tone of voice? Things like that. And so I would say, the way I narrow it down is three categories, which is brand, messaging, and marketing. And marketing comes in a bunch of different forms. That's putting the message out there. But the two others are branding and messaging. And if you don't have those other two foundational elements, it just, there's no product, there's no project, there's no company that will exist for the long term. You just can't do it. You have to have those foundational elements first. And in Web3, the messaging is so key because it's every audience is going to be super different. And if you've got like I was saying, if you've got a technical audience, you can speak a little more technically open with them. But if you want to reach a wider audience than just the ecosystem within Web3, you're going to have to go simpler. And that's where the difficulty comes in because we're talking about complex technology. But those three things.
Yeah, and you touch on three things, basically saying the three foundational things to remember and look at from any company or startup trying to market their message across. But I noticed that you've worked with Pinterest, Meta, Ford, Hyundai, and many more, just to name a few. But from the lenses of big Web 2 companies trying to come into the Web 3 space, what are some of the most common challenges with trying to appeal to this audience that might not be so tech savvy?
Here's a fun one that I get to talk about a little more openly because these fools have just completely fell off the map is Meta. We talk about Meta. So with them, it was go to market for Horizon Worlds and persona development for creators in the metaverse. So, okay, we Horizon Worlds, we Meta, we've created this platform. We're going to go to market with it and we want to introduce NFTs later. We talked about go to market for those things and, those were future things that they've now scrapped. They've basically scrapped it and they're like, sorry, we're completely out. Fine. But at the time, their biggest question and concern was how do we get Web3 people interested and involved? And when we were going through the persona development, there was a lot of qualitative research from my end, within communities that I was in or quant surveys, like different ways, basically just getting feedback from communities within Web3 to understand better What are your motivations? What are your pain points? What do you value? And how would that relate maybe to Horizon Worlds, right? The biggest hurdle they had, people hate them. People have always kind of hated Meta. Like in the Web3 space, nobody had cared much about Meta. Like that's just kind of the reality. That's the biggest friction for them, is that's the whole purpose of uh, blockchain and Web3 and decentralization, or at least one of the purposes, which is get away from centralized entities like Meta. And so it's a really hard thing to do. It's like some water company who's like only about, making Earth really clean and all that, being a supporter of oil or something. Like they're like, oh, we invest heavily in oil. Like it doesn't make any sense. So, naturally, people didn't get behind it. They struggled because they couldn't reach the audiences. They also put themselves in a place of like they put themselves right in the middle, where they were trying to appeal, and still are trying to appeal to non Web3 native audiences, and then Web3 native audiences. They're trying to get them to, and they're just it's impossible. You can't be on that fence line, especially because Web3 people don't like you anyway. So their biggest pain point was that they needed to introduce a ton of decentralization. They had to do a bunch of, co-creation and co-collaboration with existing maybe NFT projects and creators there. But if they weren't willing to give up that control, which they weren't, then you're just not going to get those Web3 people. On the Web2 side, their biggest friction is getting people to pay for their headsets, because headsets are expensive. So, there's a lot of like different friction points for different models of businesses. But the Web2 companies, they can do it right if they've already got the brand, they've already got messaging. Then they just have to tailor it towards Web3 audiences with whatever that product is. So if it's Pinterest, for example, they're not going to market for, maybe they never do, I don't know, but they're not going to market for a period of a while, because they haven't found that sweet spot. Plus they haven't gotten their creators on board with sort of technological advances. They're really struggling in that realm to expand to NFTs. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, for them, they have to put out the product in a way that makes sense to the Web3 user, and they've got to change that messaging. So they've got brand, they've got to shift that messaging for just the product. And then when they go to market it, they need to do that within the Web3 ecosystem in a different way than they normally would in Web2. And you see this with like Starbucks and other companies that have done well, and then maybe Porsche, for example, that like didn't do well initially and sort of pivoted to have success over time. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I could go a bunch of different ways with this, but there's a lot of things that you have to consider if you're a Web2 brand and you want to go into Web3.
Yeah, it's honestly the funniest part is Facebook is the epitome of centralization, right? And everything bad about data collection, and they try to go Web3 and change their whole brand to Meta. It's a colossal failure, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's tough too. Cause it's tough because personally, when I was getting involved in the project, I was really excited. I was like, hey guys, this is a great opportunity. If you do it right, if you really execute well, like, this is going to bring so many people to the Web3 ecosystem. Because even if it is just Web 2.5, it's totally fine, because people who are interested, people who do want to get self-educated, who want to go a little bit further than just what they get, they will venture out. They'll start to self-educate. They'll read the frequently asked questions section and then start researching, and they'll get involved in other areas. And yeah, it was a great opportunity for them, and unfortunately, they just didn't. They just didn't want to give up the control. They didn't want to co-create really. They just wanted to be on the fence, and unfortunately, it fell flat. It's a bummer.
Typical Zuck.
Zuck. They did a pod with Gary V, man. How could you do a pod with Gary V and then bomb?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's almost like Gary V's. Anyways. Yeah, I don't know. Thoughts on metaverse though? You like the metaverse in general?
I think it's fine. I'm not a huge fan. Like, I think it's interesting. I think it's really cool. You know, I've walked around Decentraland a handful of times. I've seen my nephews play Roblox or whatever. It's cool. It's all really interesting stuff. I think, you know, I call them metaverse platforms because we haven't really gotten to the point where I would consider a metaverse to be everything sort of open and there's cross, right?
Yeah.
I don't see that yet, and so I don't consider the metaverse, but I consider them to be metaverse platforms, and some are blockchain based, and some are not. Um, I think they're interesting. I think it can you know, do well eventually, but we are still a long ways off. And the reason I think we're a long ways off is because of the technology. This was the problem that Meta had for Web2 audiences. We went into it a little bit, but you know, we talk about pricing strategy for their VR headsets. You know, I don't know how much they are now, but I think they did like some discount. But you're still talking a few $100, $400, $500 or something like that. And the problem is nobody wants to pay for that because it's a luxury that you don't need. And I think a lot of people will compare, you know, VR headsets to cell phones, like it'll eventually become the cell phone. But the difference is we've been purchasing cell phones since they were $20 and then $60 and then $100. And then we, you know, Verizon or AT&T, you always had your free upgrade. So maybe you only had to pay $1 or $100 to get your new upgrade when they were, you know, when they got into the 500 range and that sort of thing. So we've been conditioned for like 20 plus years to purchase phones over that period of time and now pay over $1,000 for a phone. But we haven't been conditioned to do that with VR headsets. So the people that are purchasing headsets are not just your everyday consumer who's tied to their phone. They'll pay no matter what to get that phone. Is, you know, it's more so looked at as a luxury. Somebody who wants to have it just because it's an extra thing that they can spend on. It's cool for their kids, whatever. But it's going to be hard to get to that point where everybody's using it. And I really think that that's required in order to be successful with the metaverse.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it all ties back to one of the big things with crypto and Web3 in general is utility. What is the utility here? I'm not sure there's too much utility in the metaverse, to be honest. I might take some heat for saying that, but I think it's, you know, more of a platform, like you were saying. It's a platform. It's almost a video game. I think, you know, I think there's many better applications of blockchain and decentralization than you know, a video game. So
Yeah, no, it's true. And you know, it's coming. Like I did a B2B meeting in the metaverse a couple times. Like it's cool, but it's not like it's not gonna really get the ball moving. Plus we have other, you know, other obstacles to run through. Like I had a company that I was working with a while back that's a luxury biking company, luxury bicycle company rather, and they make super high end, like $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 bikes, $10,000 bikes. And you know, one of the thoughts was if we did a bike, one of the first bike races in the metaverse, and that would be really cool. But everyone's got to have their, what is it called, the stationary bike things that
they're Pelotons.
yeah, pellets. Everybody's got to have
Whatnot.
one, and they've got to have the headsets, and they've got to somehow tie in those rotations on the bike to speed and distance in the metaverse, and being able to tie that doesn't exist right now. It doesn't exist, and so even though that's a cool idea, and if everybody had it, we could do, you know, we could do a 100-person event or something. It's so far away. It's far away. That's all it is. It's just time. It's gonna take a while.
Yeah, which sort of ties into the next question. You had spoken a little bit like, in regards to, you know, the technology isn't there yet, so the, you know,
No.
the market isn't ready for it, but sort of alludes to the next question of what is your outlook on crypto in the next 5 to 10 years?
Just my outlook. I mean, dude, I'm bullish. I've seriously, there was only one moment of my experience so far within the ecosystem to say that I was bearish, and it was at the very, 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 very beginning. Like, you know, I started in 2020. I had a friend who was like, "Hey, you should invest in crypto." I was like, "Okay, let me take a look." Whatever. I didn't know anything about it. I bought Cardano. I think I bought XRP, but definitely bought Ethereum, a little bit of Bitcoin, like bought a few coins, mostly altcoins though. And then, I just, the market went down a little bit, and I was like, dude, no way. So I panic sold. I like sold everything. I was like, no way, I'm getting out. I'm gonna lose all my money. And I realized it was a mistake. A few weeks later of just doing a little more research and understanding the technology behind it. I didn't understand what blockchain was. I didn't understand that technology. I didn't understand what the Web3 ecosystem looked like. And there is a ecosystem around. It wasn't just crypto. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. There's more stuff around this. And and then it hit me when I realized that people were using this from a marketing standpoint. I saw that Nike was starting to get in and just moving the needle a little bit towards the space. And I was like, oh man, they're using this for marketing and I don't know about it. And that just like drove me crazy. So then at that point, I just went like all in. And, most of my money is tied up in crypto. I could probably pull out a little bit today if I wanted to pull out from staking. Um, but yeah, I've never been more bullish. So 5-10 years, we're going to see a lot of Web3 companies, startups, and NFT projects. NFT projects in particular, just because they have to move a little bit backward. They're going to move 2.5. So Web3 startups, and then NFT projects, specifically like the native ones that have never touched anything outside of the space. They're going to have to move back a little bit because that's the only way they're going to have a new audience to grow. And there's going to be a rare few like, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, D-Gods, Azuki. Like there's just those like really honestly like 5 or 6 blue chips that don't really need to move back to like 2.5 because they've got plenty to work with in the Web3 ecosystem because they're the top dogs. But if you're not the top dog, look at what Cool Cats is doing. They're moving 2.5 because that's the only way to gain market share without stealing it from somebody in the ecosystem. Like that's the only way they can gain new market share. They just have to move laterally. They have to move a little bit. And so yeah, we're going to see a lot of those companies move backwards just a little bit into greater audiences. Crypto, obviously, that's been happening for the last 3 years. 3 years because now you see Coinbase reaching a greater audience. Venmo is now doing crypto. Visa is moving in. MasterCard, everyone's getting in. That's Web2. So we're going to see a lot of new users coming from that standpoint. This is where it gets really fun. This is where it gets really fun, and we get to see who's going to pivot well and execute well. And specifically in the Web3 space, who's going to kind of die off because they just don't pivot well enough. And that's sad too, but I think it's exciting to see who's going to, really come out and innovate and just weather the storm. But yeah, it's going to be fun.
100%.
Let's do this. Let's take a step back from the marketing and just take a little bit to learn a little bit more about you, Christian. So I asked this so far. This is the second episode. So this is the second time I'm asking it.
Yeah.
But did you have a role model growing up who shaped you to who you are today?
It's funny. I was just asked this question on last Friday, and I immediately thought, I was like, I don't really know, to be honest. I had always thought like, oh, maybe my dad, because there were 2 things I really learned from my dad. Do more with less, and nobody really owes you shit. Just work hard. And and it was also partly because of like wrestling. As Isaiah knows, we were in wrestling together back in California. But one of the things I had learned from it was said differently by my dad, but one of the coaches at University of Iowa was the only thing you deserve is what you earn. And that's like always stuck with me. So, from that standpoint, I can't say that I've ever really had somebody who was, what would you call my mentor? I don't remember what the word was.
Role model, mentor,
model.
same thing. Yeah.
But there are definitely people that I've respected and looked up to and who have given me great advice over the years. And I'm just, I'm a huge fan of Gary Vee. So I guess if there was anyone that was like, I really strive to be more like in a sort of a business sense, it's that guy. He does really well. And I think he does it well with good morals. So, but Yeah, dad, mom, everybody, the general family stuff, right? But yeah.
Yeah, and then this actually alludes into the next question. Let's erase money. Money is not a thing. What would Christian be doing if, or what would you be doing if money was not a thing?
It's something that I will do, and I'm going to work on it in the very near future. We'll see. But well, maybe not the very near future. I don't know. Maybe like 5 years from now, I'll start building it up, or maybe I will 3 years. I don't know. Um, yeah, I've always wanted to build a space close to a high school or something like that. I don't know where it's a sort of a lounge where kids can come after school, do their homework, hang out. Got wrestling mats in there, or like we've got got a bunch of heavy bags, and kids can like. I would love to have that sort of space. There's a nonprofit in Anaheim called Skate Up, or is it Next Up? Next Up. That's what it's called. It's called Next Up. And man, it was so cool. When I first heard about it, I was like, wow, this is a really cool idea. And they basically it's a skate nonprofit. So they bought out like some little portable thing, and they have like a little skate park next to it that they built. And kids in that area go there after school. They all do their homework, and then they just like skate and hang out until their parents pick them up or whatever they do. And then they have people come in, like mentors and people from different fields and industries. Like if you're in aerospace, if you're in marketing, if you're in business, if you're in whatever, they come in and just like give them little lectures or topics, and they'll speak for like 15, 30 minutes or whatever on different topics. So and then they'll do collaborations, like they did a couple collaborations with Vans, and they've just done like really cool stuff. And I just think from my perspective, I would love to do that because I think growing up, I always felt like I didn't really have a space. I didn't really have a space for myself. Wrestling became that space, but I was also just like I was kind of a lone guy when it came to even wrestling, because I just felt like it was all on me. It's an individual sport at the end of the day, and so like I was just doing it for me, and so that was really cool. But I feel like I didn't get as much of the camaraderie that I would have wanted. And so I would love a cool space like that for kids. I would love to do that, whether it's like jujitsu, or if it's just boxing, or if it's MMA as a whole, and just have some sort of lounge place where kids can just hang out and just do stuff after school, like just hang out, do jujitsu, hit the heavy bags, box, spar. We'll teach, we'll bring people in to teach them. Like it'd be so fun to do something like that. Little mini kids fight club. So that'd be that's the end goal. That'd be the dream.
Sounds sick.
Yeah. One day. We'll see.
Isaiah, did you have any more
Yeah,
questions on that line?
I had one more question because you'd mentioned growing up, and you said growing up you were a lone wolf. But what did you want to be growing up?
Sorry, that's my dog. What did I want to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dude, I wanted to be a FBI analyst, behavioral analyst, to be totally honest. I mean, when I was in third grade, it was like I was selling kids Pokemon games and Pokemon cards, and I was like selling stuff at school. And so I remember making money that way. I remember just like I would just go to school with different things. I might trade, I might sell. I was just doing that, growing up. And it was all really cool. I thought I wanted to be a salesman. When I went into college, I immediately started studying psychology because I was like, all right, well, I'm kind of good at like people. Maybe I'll be a salesman, and maybe psychology is the way to go. Then I wanted to be an FBI analyst because I was like, oh, I could like work for the FBI, and I could like do psychology, and I just knew for some reason within myself that I was really good at understanding people. Um, Not the best, not perfect, but like I was decently good at understanding people. And so I always just wanted to do something in that sense. And yeah, I think that it changed over the years once I hit college, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want to be in the FBI, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll like go and take some marketing classes, and I did. And then I had one of my bosses just threw me into marketing one day, and that's how my marketing career started. And I found out that was all I wanted to do.
Ain't nothing to it, just to do it, right?
Yeah, pretty much, man. I mean, the nice thing is I can always pivot if I'm like, you know what, I want to be a FBI analyst, and 5 years from now or something, I'm like, oh, let me go back to do that. Probably could. I mean, I could probably figure something out. I could probably go back to school. I could probably, you know, I just don't think I really don't think that anything is out of reach. And that's the nice thing about life is I really do believe that nowadays is like if you want to pivot, you can, you totally can. So yeah, man, you just got to get in and start working. Try it, see what works, see what sticks, and that's it.
Very nice. Yeah, so I remember that question. So you were talking earlier about Web 2, 2.5, and 3. So we define for our audience, what Web 2.5 is, what the pipeline from Web 2 to Web 3 is, and the differences there.
Between Web 2, 2.5, and 3.
Yeah.
I really define it as like, Web 2.0, you kind of have to explain Web 1.0, which was the age of basically read only internet. Like, and to give you like specific examples, if you were a Fortune 500 company in that time in the early 1900s, 2000s, and you had a website, you were immediately more valuable than every other company out there because you just had a website. And a lot of people were still speculative around the internet because they were like, it's kind of a fad, it'll die, no big deal, whatever. And hilarious looking back that even was a thing. But that was the reality. If you had a website, you were immediately a little more valuable. Eventually that burst, whatever. But yeah, and then Web 2.0 came around, and that was more so like Facebook and other YouTube, even like these platforms and websites that you could actually create content. Like, so you didn't just interact, and you didn't have you weren't just reading some company's website and reading about their business or whatever. Now I could read about it, but then also if I wanted to, I could create something and put it out there for the world. And this was a very new concept. This didn't exist. The only way you had that was, I guess, if you were a newspaper writer or something, somebody in media, something like that. Like, otherwise, you had no platform ever in the history of the world. Like, you really didn't have one. You'd have to. There was no such thing.
Stand on University Avenue and shout from the steps, right?
That's all you had, and you weren't going to reach very many people doing that either. So, unless you got picked up by the newspaper or whatever. So,
Yeah.
the creation part is what ushered in Web 2.0, and that's where we're at right now, which has been really cool. And then the problem came, and the problem has been that we don't own any of that stuff. We've found out now over the years that if YouTube wants to delete us, they can. If Twitter wanted to delete us or block us, or Facebook, Instagram, and then also within the banking system, like if they want to, if you want your funds to be, or if the government wanted to freeze your funds or whatever for whatever reason, let's say you haven't even been proven guilty yet or something like that. In some cases that happens, not all the time. Like, you could lose it right then and there. You don't have really control over your finances, and you definitely don't have control over your creations of what you make on the internet, stuff that you put out there. It can always be taken away from you. And so this sort of ushered in a problem and solution where then blockchain is introduced, and Web 3.0 is the ability to now own all of that stuff. So you put it out there, and guess what? You own it. It's on chain. It's something that you hold I won't get into all the technical stuff, but basically you have a wallet or something, that maybe a backpack, and you get to put all of your stuff inside that you've created, or things that you've purchased, or coins that you own, money that you own, whatever it is. It all gets stored and owned and managed by you. So you can't, nobody can go and shut down my Ethereum and turn it off, and I don't have any access to my Ethereum. Like, I've got it, it's mine. You can't do anything about it. Good luck. Like, you just can't. And so it's really cool, and you can't shut down these systems because they're decentralized. There's no one person that owns and operates it, so it's there. And so that's sort of the beauty and what ushered in Web 3.0. So Web 1 was like, I can just kind of read it and consume it. 2 was like, wow, this is really cool, I can create it, but I don't own it. And then 3 is like, wow, I get to create it, and I get to own it. And sort of that's the Web 3.0. Web 2.5 is a mix of both. So, you'll still have centralized entities who can create, you look at, we're talking about Meta, you look at Instagram, they introduced NFTs and then rolled it back. Like you had a chance to basically create NFTs, but in the terms and conditions, if you went all the way to the bottom and read the whole thing, there is a section that basically says, in a nutshell, at any point in time, Meta could delete those NFTs. So they're not really non-fungible tokens because they have the ability to delete them. So there's that sort of centralized part. So yeah, those NFTs might live on chain, for example, something that you've created or owned, purchased, might live on chain. But the problem is you still have that centralized entity that controls the things that you've created or whatever. So, but Web 2.5 does have its benefits, because if you don't want to have responsibility over all that stuff, let's say you don't want to manage it because you might lose it or burn it, you might delete it somehow. You could screw up and delete it. Yeah, you could have an oops moment. Then it's better to have Meta manage my stuff, or it's better to have Coinbase manage my stuff, because they'll be more responsible than I will be with my stuff. Like, I'm happy to have them manage it because they'll just do a better job, I think. Or if you want to, you can be fully Web3 and just manage and own everything you want. So just depends on what you want. That's pretty much it. But those are the differences: 1, 2, 2.5, and 3. Is that pretty much covered?
Really, really well said.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, really well said. So would you say 2.5 is closer to 2 or closer to 3? I
would say closer to 2.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's a bad thing, to be honest. I really don't.
No.
I think that it's I don't think it's bad nor good. I just think it's whatever is better for you, and from a business standpoint and from a consumer standpoint. Just depends on what you want. That's all it boils down to, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of the chicken and the egg conundrum here with Web3, especially with DAOs. It's like, how can you make an autonomous organization where there's no central entity without some group spinning it up? So it's one of the things Isaiah and I and our other team members are kind of facing. It's like, we're trying to make this organization that isn't really, we don't have much part in, but how do we make it without having a part in it? So which comes first, chicken or the egg? And I think it's just about at the end of the day, someone has to do some work, right?
Definitely.
And I think it's identifying that work and rewarding it, task and bounties wise, in a fair manner that's really voted on by the community.
Yeah. I mean, and to be totally frank here, like, it's not the most difficult thing ever either, when you look at it from a standpoint of, I don't need to be fully decentralized 100% today. I don't need to be fully and I can't remember who had co-wrote this paper. It was called Progressive Decentralization. It was a A16Z something, but I don't remember their specific writers. Anyway, progressive decentralization, basically the concept is that you can progressively introduce decentralization over time. And you see this with a lot of companies. Flipside Crypto, for example, is a data company. They have a subset DAO, which is called Metrics DAO. And right now, one of their tasks is they're trying to push that DAO completely independent of Flipside. Right now, it's still moderated and managed by paid people by Flipside Crypto. So they're employees of Flipside. They get paid to basically manage the DAO, create, sort of community ownership. And then once it gets to the point where it's self-sufficient and they can, maybe those moderators and managers could step back, then they can push the DAO completely independent. The DAO can run itself. It's already been doing it for 2 years, maybe, or whatever the time frame is. And so at that point, now you've fully decentralized. Now it's autonomous. Now it's decentralized. It's not, what I mean? It's perfectly fine. And so it can work. It's, people are working on this issue, and we're seeing them function well. It just takes a lot longer than a traditional, centralized organization. And pros and cons. There's pros and cons. It's just not easy.
100%. Sweet. I was hoping we could dive into what we were talking about earlier, kind of the case study on the decentralized real estate website and our content so far, and get your 2 cents, answer your questions. What's confusing, what do you understand about the project, and what do you not understand about the project. We'd love to answer those questions, and then also address those issues and make it better going forward for everyone.
Yeah. So one of the things when you look at the website and you go, if you go straight to the homepage, on your homepage, a lot of people will make the mistake of saying what they do or what they're like going to do, or sometimes it can be done well, depending on what your organization does and sort of what the goals are. In almost every case, you should really just have your value proposition right there at front and center, and it should be short, sweet, concise, and tailored to your audience. So in the case of D-Ray, D-Ray, how to pronounce it? I say D-Ray and Day-Ray. It doesn't matter, right?
We say D-Ray.
D-Ray. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, decentralized real estate, D-Ray. Yeah.
Cool. So in that case, like talking about D-Ray, it's you kind of have to make that decision, to be totally honest, from a website standpoint, to say whether you want to go more tailored towards people who are already familiar with fractionalized real estate versus people who are understanding of DAOs and decentralization. DAO, decentralization, either one of those terms, you're already going to lose someone who gets to the website. Once they get to that website, they're immediately going to say, I don't know what DAO is. I don't know what decentralized means. And once they say that in their mind, they say, okay, this is not for me. But if I get to the website and I say decentralized, or rather, if I say fractionalized real estate that you choose and own with your community or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I'm not lost because I'm already familiar with fractionalized real estate. And the only additional benefit that you added in there that I have to think about for an extra second is that is voted on or owned by the community. And when you say that, it's a little more palatable for me to be like, oh, that is for me, because I'm into fractionalized real estate, but we choose as a community that sounds interesting. How do I get involved in the community?
Yeah.
What does it look like? Versus now I've got to learn decentralization and I've got to learn DAO. If I have to,
well, we have that for you now. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Honestly,
it's harder. But that being said, if like this totally works too, because you don't necessarily need to be palatable and understood by everyone. You really don't. If you wanted to just be like, you know what, let's just hit the Web3 natives who are into web or who are also into real estate, you can be the guys to do that, right? And now you don't have to worry about the terminology. You can keep that same terminology. You just have to know that you're not going to spread wide until people get educated, and that might not be for a while. So you just have to look at it from pros and cons and what you would rather do. But yeah, that's kind of the first thing.
Yeah, some great insight. What's the second?
So the second was, well, I guess second is kind of part of the first, which is which direction do you want to go, and is it even accurate to say fractionalized real estate, or is there a difference between fractionalized real estate and sort of decentralized fractionalized real estate? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
wherein lies that unique value that nobody else has and they really, really want?
Yeah, no, that's totally valid. So on one, yes, I think it would be probably better for us to, do the fractionalized real estate part. But really what we're building is a peer-to-peer real estate, platform where all of our members can find and propose deals. And that's really the value prop is you bring together real estate professionals and enthusiasts who are, on the ground and have that local market knowledge. And then you bring in, people who want to purchase fractionalized shares or fractionalized, ownership in real estate, and then also vote on everything that goes into it. So that's really the value prop. And, I think it's almost breaking out decentralization in a palatable manner for sure.
So is it that, because I'm trying to, just so I understand, nothing exists as of right now that allows people to introduce, if I'm walking around NFT NYC or something, and then down the street there's a condo underneath one of the giant buildings that's for sale or whatever, I might be able to introduce that to the community and say like, hey, would you all like to get involved in this project somehow? Like, does that exist anywhere else right now, or it does it not?
Yeah, not really in the space right now. I think there might be, maybe a couple other real estate DAOs doing fractionalized ownership and something maybe somewhat similar. But yeah, traditionally, there's nothing, for Web3 community to just go and do that. Primarily, that's done in a very Web2 manner, not even Web2, not even web at all. It's more like closed circles of, affluent people who are saying, let's, go into a real estate group together and purchase this and purchase that. But nothing really for, the common man to go and join these groups. There's REITs, obviously, but that's a very centralized, big conglomerate, basically purchasing and managing all of these, real estate assets, and you get returns similar to, S&P 500 returns, stuff like that, and not really that fractionalized ownership and that wealth building, generational wealth building vehicle that so many people are left out of.
Yeah, and to add on to that too, sort of where the idea originated from with me and Brendan, we were brainstorming was I was trying to get into real estate, a couple of years ago, and I didn't have the capital. And I was like, okay, maybe we can go to a REIT. But then I looked at REITs and realized that it is a centralized entity. They get to make all the decisions on the holdings within that corporation. And I didn't like that. I was like, well, what if I want to go buy a property? And I looked at other avenues of like, oh, maybe I can do this, but I got to be, I got to have a certain type of net worth or capital to get involved with it. So it really opened my eyes. Like, well, look, there's a big problem here. There's probably other people like me out there who don't have the capital to go buy a property, but then again want to be able to still participate in real estate while having some sort of unique value proposition where it's like you get to choose what you're going to participate in rather than just giving someone money and be like, here, get a return. That's cool. But for me, I sort of like the aspect of like, well, I want to be able to choose which property we're buying. I want to be able to, have a say in that. And that's sort of where the idea originated from and sort of where we're here at today. And so that's sort of where it came from.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the reason I had asked that too is because I've seen some stuff like that before, or man, maybe I don't remember how it was. It's not in like what you're saying because I don't know enough to be honest. It's not my space, but I remember being on some website, some platform where it was basically you would go into a pool of investors and you invest however much you wanted to invest, or sometimes actually I think there were minimums too.
Yeah,
tiers like 1,000, 10,000, whatever it is. And so in this case, what you're saying is there's really no necessarily minimums. You just won't get as many. Like you could basically choose some whatever it is and you can get involved as long as it's voted upon by the community. Everyone chooses, yes, that's the one we're going to end up doing. And we all need to put in however much money. I don't know. But yeah, that's cool. I think that's a huge differentiator to basically say the common guy, like anybody can go in and vote as well as invest in properties. I think that is a big one. But yeah, in the form of messaging and the way that you relay that, I think that goes well beyond Web3 audiences. I think it goes clear into the Web2 audience that has no idea that they could do something like this. It doesn't exist, but it would be hugely valuable to them if they truly didn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops.
Yeah, and that's the big thing too. I do want to touch on. There's a lot of hoops in which we were supposed to launch the our what was it the DAO this month, but we had to actually push it back due to regulations in the market. We're still trying to figure out what's the best way forward. So we understand that we want to make sure that we're taking the best step forward to ensure security and compliance for everyone that's going to participate on our platform. So that's top of mind and something we're going to be eyeing moving forward in the near future.
What's the regulation issue? Like, is it from a company standpoint or is it from the real estate standpoint?
It's more of like a securities aspect. Basically anytime you're purchasing fractionalized, equity in something, it's usually classified as security. And you really have to, ask yourself, does this pass the Howey test? And that's, one of the foundations of DRE is the decentralization aspect and the voting on everything. Because if you're, expecting a return from the work of others, then it's a security. But if we're voting on things and we're adding to those decisions and we're making those decisions, it's more of you're orchestrating, your own deal, rather than, I'm giving you money and you're giving me a return.
Yeah. Well, I will say that there's a gentleman I know who basically are you familiar with Upside Cooperative? Somewhat new. They just put out a white paper not too many months ago. So Upside Cooperative is one that you'll want to know and can make the introduction if you're interested in having a conversation to learn more.
Yeah.
But essentially, they've solved this problem of what you're talking about. So any sort, because there's a lot of DAOs out there, there's a lot of NFT projects. They're all going to eventually get hit as securities. They're all just going to get hit as securities because that's what they are. And so what they've done is they've created a model that is legal compliant and is not classified as a security when done through co-op format. So by structuring them into a co-op in a specific way, you can now basically slide past that issue of becoming a security in the eyes of the SEC. And so anyway, it's very interesting. There really is not many groups doing it in the way that they've done it, and they've been successful at doing it. So highly recommend learning more or having a conversation with them or something to even see how it would work with you guys. But it's a problem that can be solved.
Yeah, I would love to. One of the options we're looking into right now is Origami. They have a DAO operating system and a bunch of frameworks basically to help spin up DAOs.
Nice.
And yeah, so we're actually be featured in their article coming out soon. Kind of doing a real estate DAO roundup. So keep an eye out.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll look for it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, but Christian definitely would, love the opportunity to chat with. You said Upside Crypto or Upside?
Upside Cooperative.
Cooperative. Okay, I totally had that wrong here. Bug.
There you
go. Yeah, I'd love to have them, just to talk with them, chat with them, and learn a little bit more, and maybe, bring them on the podcast to let them, teach the community a little bit more about what they're doing and how people could do what we're trying to do and what other people are trying to do as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Tyler's a cool guy, CEO. Yeah, friend of mine, good dude. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people building cool stuff in the space. It's sort of never ending what everyone's building. So yeah, like you were saying earlier, 5-10 years, man, I've just never been more bullish. There's so many good things to come. So, but yeah, I mean, I love what you guys are doing. I think it's really interesting. I would love to get in the back end of the community and actually see how everything's done and see what the meat and potatoes is when I, get to sort of dig in and see how everyone works. I'm not super familiar with real estate. It's not something that, that I know very well. And so, but I think if you can reduce that, and I think that's true for a lot of people. So if you can reduce that and make that friction, if you can ease that friction between everyday consumer and person who wants to invest but has no idea how it works, may not, like you said, may not have the minimums, may not have the net worth or whatever it is, then if you can reduce that friction, you've got a real business model that can succeed and probably will do very well. So cool. Yeah. So many cool things that can be done nowadays with this new technology. So really excited for that.
100%. Yeah. And decentralized real estate isn't even the only thing, we're looking at long-term. There's so many applications of decentralization, nonprofits, communities, things like HOAs, even like you can almost think of campaigns, campaign finance.
Yeah.
Think of all your donors being able to also complete tasks for everyone and get rewarded. And, there's a lot of volunteers, but there's a lot of things that could be very well done in this format. I think, like you said, the technology has gotten so good. Not only just Web3, but also Web2. Just straight software platforms in different verticals. So, something I kind of toy with is if the founders of the if the framers of the Constitution were alive today, we'd have a direct democracy powered by blockchain voting.
Yeah. Yeah, we would.
You could, yeah. So, I think lots of exciting things in store in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, taking into account Web3. So yeah, CBDC is coming.
Oh God, don't tell me.
Yeah, it's a whole bag of worms, huh?
Yeah, geez, dude. That'll be a sad day when that happens.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple different arguments, right? I mean, the instant transferability, but then also the increased
liquidity. On-demand liquidity is the biggest.
Like the increased microscope of transactions. So
yeah, just there's going to be a lot more tomfoolery. You know what I mean? Like people are going to abuse it way more. I mean, people on the back end, politicians. Yeah, it's just we're going to see a lot more abuse. Whereas, at least right now, there's somewhat of a barrier if you've got cash. You can't just reach in and steal your cash. Like if you've got cash, you got paper. Like you can at least still transact. And there's no when it comes to a digital dollar or whatever, it's going to be such a tough thing because it's a completely centralized way of doing business. And we just know that when it comes to digital and complete centralization, just so far that track record has not been good. And it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Any CBDC is going to be basically a Web2 product, but just kind of using, blockchain technology for the transactability and the secureness of it. I'm not even sure if I could say that for, a CBDC. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine they have, wallets are going to be tied to identities or socials or something like that.
Social credits. Like you already see that. Yeah.
Hey, mouth.
Well, that's, and that's the beauty of like, yeah, that's the reality or whatever. But, I think we're also living in an era where the nice thing is we talk about Bitcoin and other, like there is going to be other blockchains that come up, layer 2s and whatever else that allow us to be more in control of our money if we want to, right? There are going to be a lot of people, honestly, there's going to be a lot of people that don't want to have control over their own stuff because they just know that they might not be very responsible with it. And we're not at the point right now where the UX is so good that we can do that without making mistakes and burning stuff on accident, burning millions of dollars or locking it up in a contract or something like that, right? Like we're not at that point where it's good enough to the everyday citizen that can do that. And so there's gonna be a lot of people that want their stuff to be controlled by a separate entity anyway. Fine, no problem. But the other thing, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier, whereas like we're kind of in this creator economy too, where one, you create great content and you own that great content. As long as you can do those two things, and people are doing that now, like for business, for money, you don't need to be tied to any social credit. Like who cares? Like when people buy cars with cash, they're like, I don't need to run credit. I don't need to ask for your loan. I'm just paying in cash. Like I don't care. Just here's my money. Take it, or I'll go to the next guy. That's how I bought my last car. Is like, no, here's the money. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to run credit. I don't need a loan. I don't need nothing. Here's the money. Transaction. We're done. Like no.
Give me the keys.
Yeah, just give me the key. And so we'll still have the ability to do that sort of thing with businesses because businesses are businesses. Not everyone's going to use the digital dollar, and we'll still be in control, but we have to take control of that ourselves, and we have to be the ones to take initiative and be like, cool, no matter what, I'm always going to be independent of reliance. I can be self-reliant so that I don't need to lean on my credit score. I don't need to lean on my social status with my digital dollar and all this stuff. I don't need to lean on that stuff because I'm self-reliant. I'm independent of those things. And you can do that over time. You totally can. Anybody can. It's just, it's a long process, and you'll have to work really hard at it, but it's not impossible. It's really not. And yeah, some people will, some people won't, but ultimately, like, we can't complain. It's really up to us.
And so I know running pretty long here, but I do want to ask one question. and it's sort of just general advice. You said you got into crypto in 2020, and you panic sold. You sort of made, I guess you call them mistakes or just learning experience. Depends how you look at it. I would say more learning experience than anything. Every mistake is a learning experience. But what advice would you give to someone that's never been into crypto, that's going to get into it? What advice would you give to somebody just getting into the space?
I give everyone the same advice for getting into crypto as I do for getting into marketing or getting into university or getting into wrestling or whatever it is. Like, try things, try different things, try this, try that, try what, I was having this conversation with my cousin because he wanted to get into wrestling, and he's a sophomore now, and he's like getting into wrestling. Like, what do I do? What advice do you have? And I'm like, just try things. You don't even know what you're good at yet. You don't even know what you like. You don't even know if you're gonna like this move versus that move. You're gonna like throws. Or you're gonna like you know what I mean. Like, you don't even know what you like yet. You don't even know what you're good at. So just try things. Try different things. Listen to your coaches, whatever. And I think the same thing with like crypto and business as a whole or whatever. Like, just try things. If you're in crypto, when it comes to trading and stuff, you have to be a little more savvy. I'm not here to give you financial advice or anything, but like, you have to be a little more savvy because we're talking about money. Like, this is your money. So if you're going to have a specific budget set aside and you're going to try and understand how that works and how you can swap tokens and bridge tokens and do this sort of, like, you can try all that stuff, but just make sure you have a budgeted amount for that. If you're going to play with it from a sort of a DeFi standpoint, play with it from a DeFi standpoint. If you want to play with it from an NFT standpoint, buy cheap NFTs and just jump into the communities and see what they're like. You don't need to spend a fortune. You can just, and some are free. Some are free mints. Just get involved. Like, if you want to get involved into Starbucks, there you go, right here. You guys, you want to get involved, jump in, get involved, and just be a fly on the wall for the first little while. Just get involved in the conversations, listen to how they work, get familiar with Discord, get familiar with like other Web3 platforms. Just literally try things, learn, take your time. There's really no rush. There's no rush to going crazy in this space. Like, just try things, see what you like, see what you don't like. If you're like, man, I just want to go all in DeFi, there's a lot of really great DeFi groups. If you're like, dude, I just want to be a shoey kind of degen, jump into Utes and just be a member on the fly of the wall. Like, just be a fly on the wall in there. There's a lot of things. It just depends on what you like, and there's a place for everyone. Honestly, there is a place for everyone. So try things and see what happens.
Sounds good. It's great advice. Everyone listening, tune in. But yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you so much, Christian.
Yeah, sure thing. I had a lot of fun. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
Always, it's a pleasure. We appreciate it a lot. Big time.
Yeah, excited to see what happens next, man. Thanks.